In the latest in our series on low-carbon buildings in the UK, we visit London's Greenwich Peninsula. This area by the River Thames used to be home to the biggest gasworks in Europe. Years of development turned it into a toxic wasteland. But now the soil has been cleaned up and restored for new housing and office buildings. Instead of cutting down trees and clearing green fields for development, this is an example of so-called brownfield regeneration.
The Greenwich Peninsula on the south bank of the Thames is still a thriving hive of activity it was centuries ago. Yet abandoned factories and obsolete gas holders are a reminder of the rise and fall of the Industrial Revolution and the pollution it left behind.
Initially it was military. It was in relation to weapons, so sort of what we call munitions, so literally bullet manufacturing, that kind of use. And then over the last 100 years, it was formerly Europe's largest gaswork.
Covering an area of roughly 120 hectares, the peninsula became a toxic wasteland after the decline of industry and shipping. Things started to change in 1966 when the United Kingdom invested in pollution control. According to the varying levels of pollution around Greenwich, different clean-up methods were used. In the north of the borough, which was seriously contaminated with heavy metals and biochemical waste, soil washing techniques were used. Because the soil carries a negative electric charge and the chemicals are positively charged, the pollutants stick to the earth. To clean them off, the soil has to be put into a scrubbing unit and taken through a series of processes that separate the larger and clean grains from the finer, dirty grains. The remaining polluted soil was sent for a second cleanup or to the landfill. Greenwich Millennium Village is an example of what can be achieved by tackling pollution head-on. So-called brownfield regeneration is an expensive process that makes contaminated land livable again. Simon Powell, who was involved in the project from the start, takes us on a tour of the new ecological community.
Putting this wetland here was to try and create some of to try and attract back some of the wildlife that would have been here a couple of hundred years ago. Because this was before it was industrial. This was what was called marshland. So it's very wet, very boggy sort of land. Some of the former wildlife that was on this site over the last couple of hundred years.
The Echo Pond by the residential area is connected to a park, giving residents a nice view through their large south-facing windows, which also allows sunlight to stream into their homes, cutting the need for electric lighting.
Brownfield land such as this is reused for employment and residential, and to sort of basically bring back vacant land back into a meaningful use.
With less and less space available for development, brownfield regeneration may be a solution to the problem, but it's also a reminder of the need to think carefully before the next industrial expansion destroys more precious land.